Welcome to part 2 with Nicole Ward. In this episode, we're going to discuss special needs IEPs and what it means to be your child's biggest advocate.
Talk a little bit about, because like me having neurodivergent children as well, like I now know what the struggle is like advocating for a child with an IEP.
Right.
And it is really frustrating to be told that you're just trying to look for a diagnosis.
Right.
You know, like kind of like the Munchausen's or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yes.
syndrome kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's really infuriating.
Yeah.
Because again, you know your child better than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And many people don't understand children that are in active trauma or have experienced trauma and are also neurodivergent have become so good at masking.
Yes. Yes.
So even to think that like, yeah, these people that spend 8 hours a day with my children or whatever should also know these things, not if they're masking.
No.
Because as soon as that child comes in the door, trauma-induced ODD.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
So have you ever been told, well, we don't see that here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Or,
Yeah.
no, your kid probably won't qualify because they make good grades.
Oh, recently, yes.
Or they're so well behaved.
Yeah.
We don't see any behavior issues with them.
Sure.
Yeah, she's well behaved because she's traumatized.
Yeah.
She's a people pleaser now.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing she can control is her grades.
Correct.
Or her work and how she is seen at school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then she comes home and she's lying on the floor in the fetal position crying
Right.
because she held it together all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's even like in my case, like going back and forth every other week,
Mhm.
like people don't understand the devastation of that. Like
Mhm.
we spend typically up to 4 days, because mind you, like he's been gone for 3 months. So now we have to re-enter into this cycle of every other week now.
Mm-hmm.
And so like even the first 3 days that they went back, I mean, my son didn't speak for 4 days,
Mhm.
you know?
Yes.
And so then we spend half of the week regulating, and then by the time we're regulated, it's already time to go back.
Yes. We did that for years.
You know? And so I understand and resonate so heavily with the struggles in the morning and stuff, because that resistance of not feeling in control.
Yes.
Their tiny little bodies,
Yes.
like not being able to control
Mhm.
and not understanding, you know, and then the fear, like we were even just driving, you know, I checked her out for lunch the other day to surprise her, and because this is his week,
Mhm.
and you know, we had to go past his house,
Mhm.
and that's her biggest fear is, well, does Daddy know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Does Daddy know?
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want to get in trouble,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
things
Yes.
like that.
Is he
It's
going to be
like,
mad at me?
I don't have to have his permission to check
Right.
you out for
Right.
lunch, you know?
Right.
But it's just like that hypervigilance.
Yes.
Already in that state of
Yes.
hypervigilance, and she really struggles with ODD, which is so difficult.
Yes, it is.
It is so painful because I get overstimulated,
Mhm.
and I have to find so many different ways to figure out, okay, how can I, one, give her choices,
Mhm.
because she also needs to have choices instead of being told just to do something
Right.
that doesn't work for her.
Right. Yep.
And how do we navigate through these really big emotions
Mhm.
to prevent explosions and breathing
Yes.
fire on people and
Yes.
stuff? So we scream in the car together,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
We dance, we
Mhm.
do these things, and give her choices like, hey, you know, you need to, can you, or you need to pick up your laundry. Do you want to do it now or in 5 minutes?
Right. Yes.
So that way she has control and feels like she gets to make a decision,
Mhm.
and it's not just do this, do this,
Yes.
do this, do this,
Yes.
because that will lead to a meltdown.
Mhm.
You know, and so it's one of the hardest things to navigate through, because when your child is so dysregulated, you feel so incredibly helpless.
Mhm. Yes.
So helpless.
Oh man. Yes.
I mean, the random emotional breakdowns
Yes.
that just, I mean, they come out of nowhere, you know? And so it's really one of the hardest things to witness. And then so I go in the shower and then I cry. That's my time to cry,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and release, so that way then I could come out and be regulated for her, you know? And that's hard because parenting 365 million days a year,
That's
like
right.
it doesn't stop. You don't get a day off.
No.
You know, you don't get PTO.
No.
You know, it's all day. It's the waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning because she had a nightmare.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's very traumatic. And a lot of the nightmares that I've had as well have been so traumatic.
Oh man, I still have them,
All the time. I'm always trying to rescue her from somewhere.
Yes.
She's, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's very, very
For keeping
hard.
her with me.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So I understand. So yeah, I talk about the IEPs. I would really like to talk about that and how, you know, what advice can you give parents in requesting IEPs for their children, how to advocate, because that's something that I'm really learning. Like I attended the Rights Law Special Education Conference. It was incredible.
Yes.
I mean, it's so much information,
Yes.
but wow, if you've never been, I would highly encourage you to go. It's the Rights Law Special Education Conference. And fun fact.
And even their website is great.
Yes. But they even have like scholarships that you can sign up for. I signed up for one, and they're giving me a high five. I signed up for one, and I mean, the tickets are $40. They're really cheap, you know, but I was able to go for free, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of information.
Yeah, it is. So, you know, I struggle with, I told you I've been a consultant for 12 years now. I happen to be one of the few special ed teachers that know the law. Just because I was a consultant, I needed to know the law.
Sure.
As a special ed teacher, you do not need to know the law to be the teacher.
Wow.
So, most of the time, neither the special ed teacher nor the administrator know the law. Parents come in thinking that they do, thinking that these other people that are across the table from you, looking at you, which is set up, by the way, on purpose, to maintain the control.
Intimidation.
Yes.
So like doing a timeshare meeting.
Yeah.
Just like,
And they present themselves as the experts,
yeah.
and the parents don't know,
Right.
you know, that they don't know what they're talking about either. So, I'd say if your child has a diagnosis, the first thing to know is that they are entitled to an evaluation, period. Whether the teacher thinks they need it, whether they have the money for it, the school, whether it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they have straight A's, they have perfect attendance, they're the star kid. If they have a diagnosis, they're entitled to an evaluation. So
I hate how they use academics to distinguish that your child does not have a neurological difference.
right. And what annoys me about everyone sitting on that side of the table trying to push that is they all know as well as I did, because I was a special ed teacher and a consultant coming in trying to get my child on an IEP. I knew the law.
Right.
Is that they know just as well as I do that grades don't mean anything.
They don't. And
You
half the
can-
time you're in below average range and they're trying to tell you your kid is doing great.
That's right. And you try to give a kid a D or an F. Before report cards come out, admin shows up to your classroom and says, get those to a C
Yes.
or better, because it can't affect our school report card, because that affects funding.
Wow.
So grades don't mean anything.
Right.
Nothing. They're
They
not
don't.
indicative of nothing, except maybe your kid can keep up with their paper and remember to turn it in.
Sure.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And those kids are few and far between.
Yeah. Which they really highlighted on benchmark tests in the conference.
Right.
Showing us like how when they try to use grades, okay, show me the percentile. Well, this is what it really means. So that means 90% of the other kids that are ahead of my child, this is where my child is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And you're telling me that this is okay and acceptable when they are struggling and falling through the cracks.
Right.
Yeah.
And depending on which school district you're in, I don't know what the case is with Moore, but depending on the benchmark company that they go with, also some companies, Star being the main one, inflates scores. So they actually do look better than they are actually doing.
Wow.
Yes. So but they bought a contract with this person or this testing company for the next 3 years, so that's what you're getting for the next 3 years.
Wow.
And so, and again, some teachers don't know anything about the testing anyway. They're told to do it, so they do it. They don't look to see whether this is a legit testing company. Who came up with this? Old white men,
Yes.
rich white men,
Sure.
you know, whose kids went to
Yeah.
boarding school and Ivy Leagues and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, everything's skewed
Right.
in the meantime. So my thing is, you know, demand the evaluation and don't stop on it. And know that it is a conscious act on the behalf of the school district to try to not get a child on IEP. It affects funding. Everything comes down to money.
Right.
The more kids that are on the IEP, the more staff they're going to need. There's not enough staff, period.
Right.
You know, and we've gotten into a situation now to where more and more people are realizing that their kid needs something.
Which is all in most cases, then a direct denial of FAPE, which
Yes,
is a free, appropriate public education.
That's right. And what's happening is kids are still being diagnosed and put on IEPs and receiving special instruction and services, but now, instead of being in a class with 5 or 6 other kids that a teacher can manage and teach, they're in a class with 20 other kids that have behaviors because the work is hard.
Sure.
Stuff's going on at home.
Right.
They're hungry. You know, all these things that go
Yes.
into it, you know. And so then they're not getting, I mean, to say that any kid is getting FAPE right now, I would argue that they're not.
I
don't care
agree.
who they are.
I agree, 100%.
And
100%.
it's sad. It's
It's
very,
very
very sad. And that's why I had to leave, is they put me, I was told, make the paperwork look right. And I was like, but we're not giving them those services. Make the paperwork look right.
Yeah.
No, I'm not gonna say that I'm doing something and I'm not.
Right.
Especially when this parent takes me to due process, I'm gonna be the one thrown under.
Absolutely.
And it's not gonna be admin that told me to do it in the first place. They're gonna go, oh, I don't know what Miss Ward was thinking. It's gonna all fall on me, you know, so.
And
no.
and for those that don't know what due process is, it's when you're filing like a legal complaint, basically, when you're taking the school system or whoever to court, which you want to try to avoid if you can,
Right.
and go through mediation, which is actually what I ended up having to do.
Mhm.
And I'm honestly, because it took them 2 years to test my son,
Mhm.
and you know, by the time that I had realized that it had been so long,
Mhm.
you know, we were going through all the court, I was moving,
Mhm.
all this stuff, so but he was really,
Cause I think I had, the last
Yes.
time you did my hair, I was like, you need to get him
Yes.
evaluated.
yes, and so he was slipping through the cracks. I was not getting communication with
Mhm.
one of his teachers that he was failing both classes in,
Mhm.
could not get a response.
Mhm.
And I was just so frustrated, and obviously emotionally he's struggling.
Mhm.
You know, he's complaining of headaches,
Mhm.
you know, and children that are in a constant state of threat or survival, like the ways that anxiety presents, particularly in younger children, like my daughter's age, is stomach aches, headaches. Those are very common
Yes.
IBS symptoms.
Yes.
Those are common signs of anxiety. And so finally they did, which was still a push, because ironically, like, they wanted to withhold him in 4th grade and hold him back for like 2 of his grades being like a D. And I'm like, I'm not going to hold him back because 2 of his grades are a D. Like,
Mhm.
no. And
Yeah.
so I pushed
Yeah.
forward, but then whenever it came to test her, mind you, she already had the diagnosis of ADHD and generalized anxiety
Right.
disorder.
Mhm.
And then whenever it had already been a year,
Mhm.
okay, gave my written consent. Oh, here we are a year later.
Yeah,
okay?
by law, it's 45 days.
Yes.
Mhm.
45 days is what the school has, okay, to test your child. And so they were not only over that for my oldest, but then for Phoenix.
Mhm.
And then so even with the neuropsych reports,
Mhm.
they were still refusing testing. the counselor responded in an email. I guess the psych was out, and she stated, can you tell me why you're wanting this? So then that in itself is triggering too, because I've been on repeat for my story for 2 years anyway. So then I'm having to repeat myself again and again and again, because whenever it came to Dakin, the psych was sending me emails and asking for the same information I'd already given her. So I pulled receipts. On this day in October, I sent you this email. I sent you the doctor's request for testing. I sent you. And we're not doing that.
Let me interject. You're making a good point. Everything needs to be in writing.
Everything needs to be. Don't be having no phone calls. Don't be having no. And let me tell you, like, they also pulled that with me earlier this year. And as a autistic person, that sent me into an autistic meltdown over the phone, and talk about embarrassing. Because as someone who is still struggling to learn boundaries and to say no, the principal with 4 other teachers surprised me on a not scheduled phone call and was like, hey, I'm here. Myself, I should have been like, this was not scheduled.
Yeah.
We're going to have to schedule a different day.
They're required.
Schedule. But not knowing that, I felt intimidated and thrown under the loop, and I literally had a breakdown over the phone. I cried. It was really embarrassing. And so moving forward, I provided all those receipts, and I'm like, I've already given you my written consent. I've already filled out the parent form, the questionnaire. Stop.
Yes.
And so finally we got him evaluated, and then now with Phoenix, they were giving me the runaround again, and I'm like, look, you guys are giving me the runaround. And then they said, her teacher isn't showing concerns, but she does have to give her specialized instruction, and that is an accommodation. If you have to give my child specialized instruction outside of everybody else because she didn't retain what you just told the whole class, that's an accommodation. And so that's exactly, by this time I had already filed a state complaint. I received a response the next day. I was really surprised. And so I forwarded that email to her and allowed her to respond. And everything, of course, with the state, they don't want the complaint to go through, obviously. And I'm, so she was asking, okay, got her signed up, we got a consent meeting, we're going to do it on this day, yada, yada. Now that we have this going, would you consider dropping the complaint? Or we're going to continue with mediation. And once everything is complete, I'll consider dropping the complaint. We'll see.
That's right.
And so we had mediation. Mediator was great, was so great.
Was he from the Special Ed Resource Center?
I believe so, yes. He was so great, and everybody was validated, heard, we all communicated very well, and they made very valid points that I needed to hear in regards to our custody. And when you're on autopilot, you've been single momming it, like, you're not thinking about letting him know things. Letting like, this motherfucker's never even been to a doctor's appointment.
Exactly.
Never been to an IEP meeting for his older kids, parent-teacher conference, not one. You know what I mean? So it's not in my forethought to be inclusive, but not understanding they are stuck in a hard place by having to abide by a decree. And so, she's like, start CCing him on every email. And I'm like, yeah, girl, why haven't, you about to get overloaded, because you don't want that responsibility. But that's also a protective measure of, you can't come back and say you weren't informed, you can't come back and say you weren't known, and so that was really empowering for me, because it has been so incredibly triggering. Like, anytime your phone goes off and you're like, I don't want to fucking talk to you. You know what I mean? I don't want to talk to you. And so, it went so well. And then also just having an advocate. If you don't know, you're afraid, or whatever it is, have someone go with you. Have an advocate go with you. And there are so many, at the conference, I met so many wonderful people. a girl that like willingly, you know, because I was asking questions and things like that, like, what do you do when you've been putting this in and they're saying no, what do you do? File a complaint.
I've sat in more IEP meetings this year already
Wow.
than I usually do in an entire school year.
Wow.
Yes. And having an advocate, every client that I've ever had says it's a 180 from before
A 180.
to an advocate.
A 180.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a total change of attitude, total change of wording, you know, all kinds of stuff. And because they know that you're
You can't
going to
play
be
no more.
informed. That's right.
You are. I am now informed.
And they will take full advantage of a parent not being informed.
Yes, yeah, and so everything went really well, and I was able to address concerns of like, you know, understanding that what you're seeing is different than what I see at home, and it's important to understand that she's in active trauma.
Right.
It's important for you to understand what masking is.
Yes.
I did this my entire life until adulthood.
Yes.
You know, and so me getting her support and help now, I'm not insinuating or perpetuating that she's going to have the same struggles as I did, which is why we're taking preventative measures to prevent those struggles from happening. Why would you want your child to go through unnecessary struggles? Of course she's going to struggle, you know, but that's what having her in therapy is for. That's what advocating is for. So that way she has the coping skills and the self-soothing skills to get through those struggles, because that is what's going to help build resilience, right? But she's not resilient because she's had to be complicit and endure trauma.
Right.
You know, and so advocating for your child is, you are your biggest child's advocate. Like, I mean, no one can advocate for your child like you can. And people will try to tell you about your child all day long, and it's like, no. What you see at school is totally different than what you see at home, because this also goes along with, where does the child feel emotionally and physically safe?
Right.
And it's typically the safe parent that the child feels like they can express anything to. So you're going to see differences in behavior, versus when I'm at my abuser's house, I have to keep it together all the time.
That's right.
I can only express happiness.
Yes.
Because
you're responsible for their feelings.
Sure. That's parentification, adultification. I am responsible for my dad's feelings.
Yep.
I've got to tame the bear. I got to keep daddy happy. I got to say all the right things.
That's
I got to act excited to see daddy,
Right.
you know. And that's one thing, like, my best friend went with me in that, you know, and she vocalized that of like, she's so good at masking, you know, because she was the third party transport during our VPOs, you know, and she's like, she's in tears on the way for me to drop her off. But as soon as we pull up to the police station, it's, gotta be excited to see daddy, you know, because if she displays anything, the repercussions of that on the home and the car, you know, and that's what's really hard. And so it's easier now too to like discard my son, because one, he's also autistic. And we know that boys display their autistic traits and ADHD very differently than girls do. Because I'm also thinking now, now that I'm learning more about traits of autism in girls, because I didn't get a diagnosis until super, super late.
Right.
So it shows up completely different. We're more internally with everything.
Yes.
Everything is internal. The dialogue is internal. Our stimming is very different. And so now that I know the signs, now I'm also seeing signs of autism in her. And a lot of hers is she has a lot of sensory overload. A lot of sensory overload. Clothes, routines. I mean, we've had complete meltdowns of routine changes. Like if she doesn't get up early enough, like on the days my mom works, and she doesn't get to get in the bathroom first, I mean, you know,
You find yourself having to, and because I had to do this, I still do it with Sophie, preparing for what's coming up, kind of briefing them.
Sure.
It's going to be this, you'll be here this long to this long, and then this will happen.
To help them mentally prepare.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do that, and that helps them be able to have time
to know what to
to know
kind
what
of
comes up.
expect.
Yes,
You know?
and she's learned to gaslight herself so much. So I'm so excited to go.
Yeah.
So she got to go after the day before. It's the opposite,
Yeah.
and that's what's really devastating is to see those behaviors early on of already being made to second guess your reality, questioning your reality, having to force yourself to be in this emotional space that's not genuine. It's not authentic to how you really feel, but I have to people please. I have to make sure that everybody else is okay. And this is how, little empaths get created is by being raised and trained to care for the emotional well-being of everybody else. So she's already learning that I have to self-sacrifice how I really feel and my well-being for the sake of other people's comfort. I have to make myself more palatable and dim my light, because if my light's too bright, it makes other people uncomfortable. I'm shamed, I'm guilted, and so I think that that's really important for especially like the teachers to understand, which I feel like, again, trauma courses.
But the thing with teaching is, since everything comes with money, especially, so you cannot compare education. So there's a few things I want to say.
Sure.
Yeah, but you can't compare education pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's completely different. There's nothing, I don't know why. I can't explain why. I don't feel like that it just changed things for some reason in kids. So we've seen a lot more behaviors since COVID has happened. It's now everybody was kind of, in a sense, traumatized by a big event that got everybody at the same time, threw everybody off of not having school for a year and stuff like that.
Well, you think of all the kids that have to go home to abuse.
That's right. And they were home alone, they were home abused, they were home whatever. Parents weren't working, now they're hungrier than ever, they're like getting food from school. It's like they didn't get to escape to school during those times and those things. But, and funding, I don't know why, because apparently everybody got all this extra money, but the schools, like teachers never see, you don't see it in the classroom. But, there was COVID money, but,
fuck you, Ryan Walters.
Yeah. Anyway, there's no professional development anymore as far as, because when trauma, so there's like buzzwords that come out in education every few years. Trauma informed came out about 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they did a PD, day-long PD of ACE scores and, a good, informative professional development. But we've also learned a lot about trauma since then. And we've also learned a lot about autism, ADHD, and neurodivergency just in the last 5 years. That's nobody's getting trained up on that in schools.
No.
So if you're not a special ed teacher that works with that disability,
they don't look autistic.
No.
They don't look like they have ADHD.
They don't, right.
What the fuck does that mean?
Right. Yeah. And that's what and then, but then they'll meet the parents and they're like, oh, and you can tell, and it's like, for whatever reason, things still aren't connecting. Like, you can see it in the parent saying that they see it in their own child, but you're still not willing to consider.
And those things are genetic. And like with trauma, like you can have an overlap of symptoms that mimic signs of ADHD and autism with trauma.
Right.
Okay. Right. But that doesn't make the child autistic or ADHD. Right. And that's where I think the overlap gets really, really confusing for a lot of people because autism and ADHD are something that is genetic. You have to get it from one parent to get it. You're born with that. And I don't consider it necessarily a disorder. I consider it a difference in processing. I process things very, very differently. And is it debilitating at times? Yeah, because when I can't executive function like I would like to, that's paralyzing.
Yes.
And so there are times where my ADHD or autism can work against me, but in the majority of cases, it's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the way that my brain will analyze things, organize things, whatever my OCD, whatever you want to call it, because I've been diagnosed with every letter of the alphabet, it's really worked for my benefits. If I would have just had that support as a child, I probably would have flourished in high school, you know, but I didn't.
Right.
So this is where the advocacy comes in now. When you don't know, you don't know. But when you do, you do the best you can and you advocate for your child in hopes that they will not have to endure the same struggles. But when you have narcissistic parents like that, it's the, well, because I didn't have this, you shouldn't have it either.
Right.
So because I suffered, you should suffer too mentality.
Right.
And that's devastating, you know, to think that, because narcissists are jealous of their own children, especially if the attention is not on them, which is why they got to be in the limelight. Oh, I'm gonna post pictures. I'm gonna take you on a trip to Disney World.
And why they will ruin their child's birthday party.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It always has to be revolved around them.
Yeah, and you know, that's one thing that bothered me about teaching, was that teachers were being so inundated with all this extra crap that they have to do that really has nothing to do with teaching kids content.
Yeah.
You know, just letting the teacher control their classroom and do what works for them and those kids in the classroom.
Right.
The people, the fat white men up top that come up with these ideas don't realize that teachers are, no class is the same because the kids aren't the same, and you have to constantly know
accommodate.
I mean, it's very taxing, and most teachers want to do the best for those kids, you know, but they don't know that they're missing out on information. They don't know that that, you know, there are many teachers that still don't understand the difference in neurodivergency and neurotypicalness.
Yeah.
They don't even know that there is two different things, you know, and the way I've explained it to teachers when they're hearing about it from the first time from me, trying to explain why this kid is the way they are, I always say it's like Apple and Android. I said, you're asking this kid that has only used an Android all his life to come into your class and make this Apple work. I said, have you ever tried to go from your Apple to an Android? And I said, you know what you want it to do.
Nope.
Yeah.
I will never.
Right. You know what you want that phone to do.
Right.
But doing it the way you do it on your Apple, on that Android, you're not getting, and it's very frustrating.
Right.
Most of the time, people won't even make that switch because it's too big of a learning curve.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then they're like, oh, and I'm like, it's just two different operating systems. The way, trying to get to the same end, but how they get there is different. And then the teachers will be like, oh, that makes so much sense. So when this kid's doing it this way, you know, they're going to end that if you give them a second. That's the big thing.
Yes.
Give them a second.
Yeah.
Back off.
Yeah.
Just wait and see, you know, instead of, I want it this way. This is how it says to do it. I said, I promise you, if you're working with an autistic student, 99% of the time they are going to blow your mind with what they can do.
Absolutely.
Give them a second.
But they're not given the opportunity.
They're not.
It's like they're automatically doubted.
As soon as they start doing that wrong operation, it's
Right.
It's this way.
Yes.
Instead of let them work through
Figure
it.
out what
Yeah.
works for them. And especially like with ADHD, I feel like once you know you have an ADHD child in the classroom, I feel like one of the simplest things that you can do is break up the work.
Yes.
Like,
Small
for her,
pieces.
you know, she's almost 8, she's in 2nd grade. Give her 4 problems.
Yes.
When you're done with these 4 problems, I'll snip off another piece.
Yes.
I'll give
That's
you the next
right.
4.
That's
Instead
right.
of having 4 pages of math and then saying, I mean, we've had meltdowns, and I've had to tell our teacher, like, this is something that we just can't do.
Well, I've gone to teachers that are like, well, you know, I just don't have time to do that for one kid. Do it for all of them then.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
And then see how everybody's behavior
Yes.
changes.
Because I feel like a lot of the neurodivergent ways are actually better and more
Efficient.
Yes.
And effective.
And effective.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
And when my very first teaching position was at Norman High, I did the autism class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the whole spectrum.
Okay.
To very dependent on help,
Mm-hmm.
to not needing much, just every once in a
Right.
while checking in with me,
Right.
something like that. And I stayed in the classroom with my more dependent kids, and I remember working, who were mostly nonverbal,
Right.
so I wasn't getting that from them, but just working with them and knowing them, I remember saying, man, the way they think makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
I'm like, why, and that, looking back now, I'm like, oh, probably because my brain works that way as
Right.
well. But I could manage both sides.
Sure.
I could do an Android and an Apple at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah.
One better than the other, but
Right.
whatever, I could pass.
Yeah.
And then the kids, unfortunately, it's getting a little better, little better. That were the most discarded, so to speak, the ones that were less likely to be worked with, time spent on, was our autistic ADHD kids. And it was just kind of they have their problems. They cause problems,
Of course.
especially your ADHD kids, they're just bad.
I hate that. I hate it.
And I would have kids come into my classroom and say, I'm just a bad kid. And I'm like, there is no bad kid.
There's no.
And trying to they're like, and some of them would really be confused by that. What do you mean there's no? And I'm like, kids aren't bad.
Well, you get labeled. They get labeled that so freaking quickly, and I'm like, that's where I feel like more training needs to come in, because it's like you're automatically labeling a child's actions.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're not getting to the root of the
That's right.
behavior.
That's
What behavior is driving the action?
That's right. And while I was teaching that autism class is where I became interested in behavior analysis.
So are you doing ABA?
Well, I'm not.
Okay.
And so I went through the coursework. I did the supervision. I did all the coursework, and then all but about 500 hours of the supervision. But I was also going through my court hell, and that's where all my money was being spent. Now I have conflicting feelings about ABA.
I agree. Yeah.
So it's not something that I want to pursue,
Yeah.
anymore. I thought about it when I left teaching, but it's just, I hear too many negative things from the people that have been through it, and I'm the person that believes the people that went through it,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's that. But I learned that there is a reason why everybody does everything.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
And if I can identify that reason, then I can help.
Sure.
And people that I worked with and people that I worked for were always kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say amazed, but intrigued by how well I understood and could work with the problem kids.
Yeah.
And when I was in middle school and high school, I was a problem kid.
Yep.
I could sleep through class, still make a straight A, did acid the night before I took the ACT, scored a 28, I could pass.
Right.
But I was going to raise hell in the classroom.
Right.
And the less you tried to understand me, the more hell I was going to give you. And my mom.
I think you had PDA.
Yes, I know I do. Yeah.
So PDA is pathological demand avoidance.
Yes.
I know I struggled with that for sure. I don't struggle as much with it now, but I still hate being told what to do.
I think that's how I ended up married to my ex-husband.
Yeah, and that caught my attention when you said that. So someone just telling you that you can't do something or you shouldn't do something, and I really struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
Even as an adult, because it's like something, especially if it's something that you've already planned on doing, but then if somebody tells you to do it, I'm not going to do it for another 3 weeks now.
Right. Yes.
Because your brain is just like wired that way. So I try to like be preventative and do things before other people tell me to do it. But it really just depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? I think there's a difference between when you're given advice that is warranted and wanted and that you
Right.
asked for
Exactly.
versus unsolicited, like,
Yes. Yeah.
no.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
You know?
And, you know, I was a behavior child because I was angry. Stuff
Yes.
had happened to me,
Sure.
you know, and my parents got divorced and I was starting new school, you know, all these things. And so I really related to those kids as well, you know, and just knowing that they're not trying to be assholes.
No.
They're not.
They're trying to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they will get any kind of attention that they can get.
Sure.
So you, really, teacher,
Yeah.
get to decide what kind of attention they're going to get.
And see, and like I know, like when my daughter, like whenever she displays things like that, I know that she's yearning for connection in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, like I'm able to come to her and I can say, I can see that you're really having a hard time right now. And validating those
Yes.
feelings, because it's hard when I have two children.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a single parent. Yes, we live with my parents, and so yes, I have help,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But she wants my attention.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's very hard when she sees brother getting attention or say me and him go do something.
Right.
You know, it's very hard. And she has, I don't know if it's necessarily like separation anxiety, but like she can go be at a friend's house all day if she wants to play. But if I leave and try to go somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she'll follow me out to the car crying and doesn't want me to go.
Right.
You know?
Can you get out?
Yeah,
Are you sure?
yeah, I saw it.
Okay. So she'll follow me to the car, you know, and cry and be really upset. And I've just been very validating in that, like, hey, are you needing some attention right now?
Mhm.
You're struggling,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
Those are some big feelings, and that's understandable. And letting her know that, like, it's okay to want those things, and it's also okay for you to play by yourself sometimes.
Right.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, she's went through so much loss,
Yeah.
incredible loss, not having her sisters. Everything that was familiar has been ripped from her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the day I left, there's another woman and her
Yeah.
children in the house.
Mhm.
Before that even, you
Right.
know what I'm saying? And so it's like everything that was stability,
Mm-hmm.
somewhat stability, you know what I'm saying, as far
Yes.
as like familiar faces
Right.
in her life, are now gone.
Mhm.
And so it's like really disheartening when she goes through those moments of understanding that she's yearning for connection
Mhm.
in those moments, and we can validate
Yeah.
that and say, hey, I hear you,
Mhm.
I see you,
Mhm.
I understand. Give me 10 minutes
Yeah.
and we'll play the emoji
Yeah.
game. You
Mhm.
know, but
Yeah.
like you said, giving her a heads up, hey, at this time, and that's why I'm really careful of not making promises to my kids
Yes. Yes.
and not using language like that and
Mhm.
say, we'll see, maybe it's a possibility,
Mhm.
because I don't want to ever let her down
Right.
in that way of saying I'm going to do something and then it didn't happen,
Right.
which is a struggle with ADHD.
Yeah.
And especially if you're navigating through chronic illness,
Mhm.
I don't know how I'm going to feel from day to day.
Yes. Yes.
So I want to do these things, I
Yeah.
absolutely do, but then when the day comes,
Yes.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's really
Yes.
hard.
It is.
So,
It is hard.
yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I just, as a teacher, you know, like I started to say earlier, I don't want to say that okay, so teachers did look up to me as far as my approach to special ed, and that I believe the parent. I believe them.
Yeah.
You know, I believe the kid. I'm gonna ask the kid.
Yeah.
The kid's gonna be involved in this process. They're gonna have a say. They're gonna tell me what they need, and I'm gonna give it to them. If it turns out they don't need it, so what?
Right.
You know, and that was my big thing on evaluations. They're like, well, we can't just be evaluating every kid. And I'm like, why not?
Why?
Well, we don't have the manpower. That's not our problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, not my problem. You
Yeah.
know, but you know, I'm not gonna. What skin is it off of anybody's nose to evaluate a kid? Either they qualify or they don't.
Right.
Prove it to the parent then if you feel that strongly about it. Then
Right.
you know, whatever.
Mhm.
You know, but I've never seen a kid not qualify
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And there were a couple times where we had to wait because the child hadn't been in public school, so we didn't know if they just hadn't had the education.
Mhm.
And by law, we're required to wait
Mhm.
9 weeks, and so you have to wait to see if they make any progress. And if they do, then you can decide, do we wait longer or what, and I'm never a wait and let's see.
Yeah.
That is
Right.
so dumb.
Yeah. Because then it further backlogs any progression
Yes.
that they could have had.
That's right.
If they would have gotten
And
help
we
earlier.
know how important early intervention is.
Early intervention, yeah.
And then my other thing was, I'm not trying to change these kids.
Right.
I'm not trying to make them normal, because quite frankly, I think the typical kids,
Yeah,
they're
I
boring.
hate
I
that.
don't want to be around.
What is normal? What is normal? Well, that's a part of colonialism, I feel like.
Yes, it is.
And so we've got to decolonize the mind
Yes.
and readjust of what we have been conditioned to think is normal, which is the typical white cis,
Yes.
you know,
Exactly.
patriarchy
Yes.
mentality.
Yes.
And so no,
Yeah.
I'll
And
be weird all day.
And as a special ed English teacher, it's only been in the past couple of years that it dawned on me that proper English is a colonial idea.
Absolutely.
Because
Words
I was
are made up.
forever correcting people's grammar.
Oh, yeah.
Because my mom is an English teacher, and
Okay.
she to this day corrects my grammar.
Oh wow.
It's only, like I said, that from Facebook, it dawned on me,
Yeah.
and I haven't done it since. Because it's like, no, I'm not buying. Man,
Man,
you got me.
I
You
had
got
so many
me.
word police over the years at Facebook, and I'm like, arrest me, okay, arrest me. I don't spell shit right. I don't care.
And I feel
They're
so,
made up.
I feel so gotten by that colonial idea.
Yes,
You know, I'm
yeah.
like, oh, I hate it
Yeah.
that they got me. You know, it's kind of the way I feel on Israel right now. But
Yes.
we won't get into that. But you know, it's just kids are in education, especially, as we have to remember, kids are kids.
Kids are kids.
We cannot force them to move faster than they're going to.
Right.
In fact, you try that with an autistic person, it's going to slow them down.
It's unrealistic.
It's going to slow them down.
Yeah.
You know, so
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's finding what works. You have to be intentional about it. You have to be willing to know that kid.
Yeah.
You know, they might not be the cutest kid.
Mm-hmm.
They might be the smelliest kid.
Right.
And then you find out why they're the smelliest kids, because they are being sexually assaulted every time they go home. So they try to stay as disgusting as possible so that people will leave them alone. You know, I worked with a teenage girl, a special ed gen ed teacher came to me like, what is wrong? Just totally had it with this 14-year-old girl. And she was difficult. She was mean. She was mad. She fought at the drop of the dime. It didn't, man, woman, it
Right.
didn't matter.
She's a fight or flight.
Yeah.
You know.
And this gen ed teacher just came to me just done with this child. Remember,
Yeah.
still a
she's child.
kid.
Yeah.
What is wrong with her? Why is she so angry? And I said, I don't know. It might have something to do with when she was 3, all 4 of her family members were shot and killed in front of her, and she wasn't found until hours later, and she was the baby that had the bloody footprints through the house. I said, that could have something to do with it. And then the teacher's like, oh. And I'm like, yeah,
See, I love.
yeah.
So Dr. Bruce Perry's work, he co-wrote a book with Oprah, and I've talked about this book before. So he has 2 different books: the Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog,
Mhm.
and then What Happened to You.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's such an important question to ask versus what's wrong with you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
start asking, what happened to you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What happened to you?
Yes.
What's going on?
Mhm.
You know, why are we here? Why are we acting
Mhm.
this way? Like, what's driving this behavior, instead of saying, what's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm. And when that
Something wrong
teacher
with you.
came to me about her, I called the child in that afternoon in my classroom, and she wasn't in any special ed classes or anything. She was just on my caseload because
Yeah.
she was ED. And I called her in. I said, "Are you know, what's going on? Is you having a good day, rough day, whatever?" And she's a typical teenage girl.
Yeah.
It came out in our conversation that she was on her cycle at that time. People don't consider the hormonal changes in middle school girls.
Right.
Been in foster care her whole life. Who knows what happened in that? You know, I only know this one traumatic thing that happened to her, and she's always been sweet to me. And I told her, I said, you know, this teacher came to me and it sounds like you're having a hard time in her class, and I'm not. She has a hard time with me, you know, and I totally believe it.
Yeah.
You know, and but she sits around and she talks to me for a minute. Well, we're talking, and as the conversation progresses, it's the 8th, 9th, 10th year anniversary of the incident. You know, and it's like, And she apologized to me. I'm sorry, Miss Ward, it just gets hard. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, don't apologize. You know, it's so
Yeah.
sad that it's
Right.
like, man, you're just a kid,
Yeah.
you know, do not, you know. And I told her, well, you know, I made it clear to that teacher that there are times that you're going to struggle or whatever. And so 6 weeks, something later, come back to me. And she said, I don't know what you said to her, but she has been so much nicer to me, and we get along great now. And, you know,
It's just
they have
understanding.
it is. And that
Yeah.
teacher, she was a new teacher.
Yeah.
She was at her wit's end because, you know, you don't get any help except from maybe another teacher if they have time, you know. And she felt terrible,
Right.
but it changed her outlook on how she saw other kids in her classroom.
Sure.
It changed her perspective on special ed.
Mhm.
Like, you're not retarded
Right.
because you're in special ed,
Right.
you know. You're not
You
even.
can receive special education services even for like emotional disturbances if you're struggling, you know, if a child has endured trauma or like they have generalized anxiety disorder, like, and that is directly affecting their
Yes.
schoolwork.
Yes.
It's affecting their performance, how they show up, and especially in kids that have ADHD, you will constantly see
Yes.
those scores go up and down. I know already with hers, it's been, you know, every year they fluctuate
Yes.
so much. You know,
Yeah.
those are things to look out for.
Yeah. So, you know, for parents, they just have to stick with their gut. They know, as much as the school will try to convince you that that's not a problem, we don't see it, you know, they do great, you have to stick to your guns with it, you know, because the kids, the littlest implementation of an accommodation or a modification can change the whole directive of their path, you know. I had a mom email me. I taught 1 year, COVID year, at Moore High School, which happened to also be the year that all those cross-country kids were hit and killed by that man that drove up on the sidewalk or whatever. Talk about traumatizing an entire group of people at once.
Sure.
Had an autistic kid in my class. You know, his hygiene wasn't the best. Teenage boy, you know, whatever. Smart. God, he was smart. He read, I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Night by Elie Wiesel. It's a Holocaust book. It's not very big, but he read it within the class hour. You know, just.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe him at first. So I asked him some questions, and he knew all the answers and everything, but his mom was so worried about his future, you know, because high school was just not it, you know, for him. And I say, parents need to know that school can be traumatic for kids. Just the stuff that happens at school, especially now, it's more traumatizing than ever.
Right.
Bullying is out of control.
It is. Yeah.
Nobody can control it.
Right.
Nobody follows through with any kind of legal,
Yeah.
you know, so it happens daily.
And it's very, we've, you know, dealt with some bullying and things like that. And I think what's really hard, because even Latricia's son recently has like dealt with that at school, and he's autistic. And it's hard because these are also children that are doing the bullying.
Yes.
And so I'm always looking at it from a point of compassion of like, again,
What happened?
what has happened?
Yep.
What's going on to drive this person? I mean, it's the same way I addressed my own bullies. You know?
Right.
I'm like,
Yes.
why can't we be friends?
Yeah.
You know, having that compassion and understanding, like, why are you going around fighting everybody? Where is this coming from? And that's what makes it difficult, because immediately, once again, the label is that you're bad.
Right.
You're bad.
Right.
So that's fueling, well, I am bad. So if I'm already bad, I'm going to do this. I'll show you, you know, that type of thing. And it's like, I wonder how often someone is to set that person down and say, hey, I can see that you're having a hard time.
I've done it.
And you're distributing behavior that's really negative and harmful to not yourself, but to others as well. Let's talk about it.
Oh, I've done it.
You
And
know?
it changes, it immediately changes your relationship with that kid.
Sure.
Because they realize someone's paying attention
Someone
to me.
sees me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're looking past
Right.
the stuff that I'm doing
Right.
and recognizing that there's, because I've sat with kids and I've said, I had to come face to face with this kid because he was the kid that fought everybody. Me, he was bigger than everyone else, picked on everybody.
Right.
Naturally, I find out later, terrible home life, all this stuff. But I sat him down, I looked at him, and I said, there is nothing that you can do that's gonna convince me that you're a bad kid. Nothing. And he was like, he was pissed. And he just kind of sat there and looked at me, and finally he was like, nothing. So even if I killed somebody, and I said, it wouldn't make me believe that you're a bad kid. It'd make me think that you unfortunately made a really bad decision, but I'm gonna help you clean it up and do what I can to get past it. And I said, but you're not gonna be able to push me away like you've been successful in the past. I'm not gonna give up on you. I will never ever believe that you're as bad as you think that you are. And, you know, I was warned about this kid coming up from elementary. You know, elementary teachers warned me of this bad kid, you know, and he tried, you know, but it changed our relationship. And his mom came to the IEP meeting and just cried about how he came home and told her that he thinks he has a teacher that might actually like him, you know, and stuff like that. And behavior incidences went way down. He's an empathetic kid. He was just trying to keep people away from him, to not pick on him.
Very avoidant.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, he was.
And this is how attachment styles show up as children progress into adulthood. You know, with like having an avoidant attachment style, like say like that he probably had, is I want connection. I want to feel love. But once someone shows me that, I'm going to push away.
Yes.
I'm going to be avoidant.
Yes.
So I'm going to act out.
Yep.
I'm going to, and that's the fight or flight reaction. That's the body, the nervous system saying, threat, connection, no.
Yes.
But I want it.
Yes.
And that's an internal conflict that people don't understand. It's not a choice.
Right.
Your nervous system has been so wired
Yes.
and conditioned from infancy to perceive connection with other people as a threat. You know, so it's not something that's a conscious choice.
No.
And you know, that's where therapy, of course, and things like that can help. But it's very important in early prevention. Like I even feel like even if kids just go through a divorce or whatever, like they need therapy.
Yes.
And that's one thing that Bruce Perry's work highlights on, is that even kids in the foster center, he has his stories that he was one of the we talked about this in our first episode, one of the psychologists that was there when the Waco.
Oh, yeah.
They don't care about mental health.
Right.
And he was so shocked. Like, I mean, one of the little girls, the things that she had witnessed, murder, and gets thrown into a system, and he's like, well, who's she seeing for her therapist? And they're like, what therapist?
Right.
Oh, she's not going to remember. Kids are resilient.
Their body will remember anyway.
Their body, and that's again like what experiences do. It's not. You and I could be in a car accident together. You could walk away with night terrors, severe PTSD, and I could be fine.
Yep.
So it's not the experience that changes; it's the impact of that experience that changes the neurological physiology in the body.
Yes.
You know, changes your DNA, like all your epigenetics, all of that, it changes. And so two people can have the same experience but two different outcomes.
Yes.
And that's the same for children growing up in the same home.
That's right.
Witnessing abuse, domestic violence. One child can turn into the people pleaser, codependent, enter into abusive relationships. One kid could, you know, be the cycle breaker. One kid could be the abuser. You know, I mean, like, there's just so many different directions based off of that child's, how they internally processed that experience, which a lot of times ends up being disassociation. And that's why it's so fragmented, because we don't remember, you know, and that's our body's way of trying to protect us, you know, in those moments.
Yeah. And, you know, my last 2 years of teaching, I did the behavior kids, which is a new buzzword. Behavior programs are the new buzzword. They're putting them in every school now. They're not training the teachers.
Okay.
They're not providing any kind of additional training to get these things started, you know. I enjoyed it. My kids enjoyed it. I mean, it's one of those things where my kids enjoy it so much that I can't get them to go out you know, because then I've become their safe place, you know,
Sure.
and, you know, it's on that first day of school that I tell them I was the bad kid, and they're like, they don't ever think of their teacher being a bad kid, you know. I said, and there wasn't a teacher to stick up for me. I said, I remember my 10th grade year, I had this one coach. It was supposed to be a history class, but he read the paper the whole time. But he was the only one in my entire educational career after I started acting out, which was after my parents got divorced. I think I was walking back to my desk, a boy touched my butt, I turned around, grabbed him, and like slammed him down on the desk, you know. And the teacher, and the kid was like, and the teacher kind of looks around his newspaper, like, what's going on, you know? And I'm like, don't ever fucking touch me again, you know?
Yeah.
And he stands up and he's like, whoa, 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 you know? And I started crying because I'm overwhelmed and stuff. And I'm not a person that likes to be touched unexpectedly, especially not on my butt.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm just trying to walk, you know, I haven't given any signals or anything like that. And he tells the class, and my mom was the principal of my high school too, so I got some flack. People are always telling me what a bitch my mom was, and because they got in trouble and stuff like that, you know. And he said, you know, we might not know what's going on with her, but she puts up with a lot. He stuck up for me to this class, you know, but it let me know that he knew something else. And that's the only experience I had with that through school was one teacher that let me know that he understood that something else was happening to drive these behaviors, you know. And he wasn't a great teacher. I don't remember him teaching us anything, but I do remember that, you know. And I told this, and I would tell my students on the first day of school, you know, you're in here because other people think that you have behavior problems. And I said, but I'm your teacher because I know that you don't. I know that situations happen that cause us to behave one way or the other, and sometimes we're not exactly proud of the way we have, and sometimes we are pretty confident with the way we reacted. You know, and that's okay. You know, and I would tell them, I'm your person here. I said, you know, we're going to work on one thing at a time. You know, I said, but I want you guys to know that really I'm working with the adults more than I'm working with you.
Well, it's just like, I always think of like Caesar when he's training dogs, but really he talks about I'm actually training the people.
That's right.
It's the same thing. You've got to reparent the parents to help them be able to understand their child better, to connect with their child better, because it's a lot of authoritarian approaches. There's many parents that, like with my ex, like that's how it is. It's not only was there abuse involved, but it's always the fear and intimidation, control, instead of empathy, compassion, nurturing, guidance, you know, and allowing that child to develop into their own individual self and not an extension of the narcissistic parent. You know?
And, you know, one thing I would work on the students with, you know, as kind of a group goal, so to speak, was engaging in a battle of wills with the teacher. And I would tell them, you know, you're never going to win that. I said, just the fact that they are an adult and they are a teacher, you're going to lose every time. I said, it's just, I said, I hate it. It doesn't make any sense. I don't agree with it, but that's how it is. I said, so the only thing I'm asking you to do is if you find yourself in a situation with a teacher, I just want you to stop talking and come to me. I said, just stop talking, turn around and walk away. And I said, one, you're taking out the power away from them to a grade, and I said, and then you're going to come to me and I will handle it with the adult. And I said, that's going to go over way better than a kid trying to do it. Teachers hated that.
Oh, of course.
Hated that.
Of course.
And I had prepped the teachers, look, they've been told that to avoid a power struggle with you, they're going to walk away and they're going to come to me. And I told them that even if they yell at you to come back, they are not to go back. They're just to keep saying, I'm going to Miss Ward. Tell them where you're going so everybody knows. Just say, I'm going to Miss Ward. And they hated that. But that is one thing that my admin backed me on. You know, it's like, because I can't trust the teachers to not engage in this power struggle. The kids are willing to do it because they want their school experience to be better than it has been,
Sure.
you know. And it was hard for the adults to manage stuff like that.
I believe it.
But the kids were able to do it, and there weren't any of these. I mean, sure, the teacher sent me a big, long, scathing email about how disrespectful this kid was for not doing what they were told to do, and then walking away after they were told to stop, and all these things,
But what you're teaching a child is that they have to comply.
Right.
That they just have to be silent and comply, and then not understanding that these very principles that many adults are teaching kids, whether it's in the home or outside of the home, this is how you're raising children to be complicit,
right,
and be silenced if
right,
they be abused
right,
or whatever,
exactly,
because they've been taught not to speak
right,
up.
right,
They've been taught that adults are superior,
right,
that we're inferior.
yeah.
And that we have to do whatever they
Right.
say. We're not allowed to question.
They are the authority just
Yep.
because they're older.
Yep. That's how I was taught.
Yeah.
And I questioned that. I pushed back. I mean, that's why I was
Me
in and
too.
out of the home as young as 15.
Me too.
Because I was like, no, I don't understand what the Bible's saying.
Yeah.
I'm asking all these questions that my parents didn't have the answers to.
Mhm.
So that was like a threat to their intelligence and everything they knew, because it was uncomfortable for them.
And see, I had the
Yeah.
opposite experience.
Mm.
My dad, now I know, and
Mhm.
he's not willing to accept it, but I know that he's neurodivergent.
Yeah, my parents
I
were
know
too.
he's probably on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I mean, he can play music by ear on the piano, cannot read music,
Yeah.
but can go over and bust out a Beethoven, whatever.
Yeah.
You miss a wrong note, he'll tell you what note you missed and
Yeah.
what note you should hit. Just all from ear.
Yeah.
Pitch perfect, all
Yeah.
that stuff. But my dad and I are a lot alike in that we tested that stuff. Like, I really need to know if you're going to follow through with what you're threatening me on. I'm going to test you to see if that's really going to be the consequence.
Right.
And sometimes the consequences are worth it to me, so I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
And I wasn't raised to see every adult as an authority.
Right.
And and that's one thing I am grateful from
Sure.
my parents, is that I feel like, it wasn't all roses
Sure.
and peaches, there was definitely some dysfunction in there, but as far as how they treated their kids, they did the best with what they could have,
Absolutely.
and they allowed for us to do what we want and be the people we wanted to be.
Sure.
Even when I was having all the trouble and getting in trouble at school, and then eventually getting arrested a couple times, and drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all of those things, I never had to question whether my parents were going to support me,
Right.
ever.
Right.
I never had to fear calling one of them.
Right.
Did I have to fear that they might let me sit there for a few hours?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're going to come through.
Right.
And they're still going to come through to this day,
Right.
So,
I think that's what's hard in a lot of cases is as an adult, when you're speaking outwardly about your experiences, there's a lot of times people how could you talk about your mom like that? And how could you talk about your dad like that and all this stuff? And it's this is what it means to show up in authenticity.
right.
And everybody has a right to tell their story,
Right.
and it's not to bring shame or judgment, because like you said, we can hold grace and compassion and understand that they were doing the best they could with what they knew,
Right.
but also validate our experiences that a lot of the choices they made were harmful and heavily impacted our
Right.
psyche
Right.
and who we became as adults.
Mhm.
So even my experiences, I can hold space and acknowledge that the abuse that I endured with my mother was never my fault. It should have never happened. But also as an adult now, I get to choose whether I want to engage with her. And that relationship now is extremely healthy. And that has good boundaries in place, because as children, this is where it differs, just like in our stories, where I think a lot of people in positions of power don't understand that, one, yes, that's how cycles continue, okay? And secondly, there's a huge difference in a child that grows to be an adult and gets to actively choose for themselves if
Mhm.
they want to engage and have a
Right.
relationship with
Right.
a parent that was abusive.
Right.
Whereas a child doesn't have that choice.
Right.
That's their caregiver,
Mhm.
supposed to be,
Right.
and they don't have a say. Their
Right.
voices are invalidated,
Mhm.
they're silenced,
Mhm.
and so as the other parent, that's my responsibility to advocate, be that person for
Mhm.
my kids
Mhm.
that I didn't have for me.
Right.
And when they get into adulthood, if
Mhm.
they choose to have relations
Mhm.
with him,
Mhm.
that's their choice.
Right.
And it'll be a conscious decision
Right.
that they feel empowered that
Mhm.
they get to choose.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's enforced
Yes.
by a court document
Right.
that you have to be subjected to this.
Yeah.
And that's terrible.
It's
And
awful.
that's where I feel like as a system, when our judges and caseworkers and things like this, when do they get to be held accountable for that?
Exactly.
Like they are
Exactly.
just I mean, it's just like in many cases of women's that I've read, but you know, when their abusers are let out on parole, after they violated VPOs, after they've been reported, after they have police documentation, and it's like, when do the people that are in positions of power that are complicit in
Mhm.
making these decisions and enabling abuse
Mhm.
and endorsing it,
Mhm.
saying this is okay,
Yeah.
this is absolutely okay. You know, I have a friend that her husband was in the military, and her daughter, I mean, he sexually abused her for like 6 years.
Mhm.
You know, after she pleaded with the courts and told them these things, and then they awarded him with joint custody, and he proceeded to rape her for
Mhm.
years.
Mhm.
You know, and it's
Yeah.
like, shame on you.
Mhm.
Shame on you.
Yeah.
And I remember even leading calling the attorney back after she left me the voicemail that day, and I literally said that to her, and I said, I don't know how you sleep at night.
Yeah, I said that too.
I said, shame on you.
Mhm.
And I said, I sat with you for almost 3 hours of my time, and I said, and I watched your face
Mhm.
in horror
Mhm.
and disheartening
Yeah.
at the things that I presented to you.
Mhm.
And you are knowingly and willingly
Mhm.
enforcing me to send my children back over there. Shame on you.
Well, I asked Bridget Childers, well, I asked my attorney about, I'm talking about Bridget, I asked my attorney, I said, because Bridget, you know, was the main one wanting my daughter to maintain this relationship with her dad. And when the sexual allegations came up, I asked my attorney, I said, what recourse is there for any of these people if it turns out she is being,
Yeah.
or if he kills one of us? Because there was a time that she and I were both worried that he was going to kill us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And my attorney said there isn't any.
There isn't.
There isn't any.
I mean, the motion my attorney filed, our first motion when I got her, I mean, she put that in the motion. She said if she listed the things that had already been brought up, and she
Mhm.
said if something were to happen to Miss Pennyfeather and her children,
Mm-hmm.
that is on the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you guys have been told, you have
Yeah.
been warned, you have been informed
Mhm.
time and time again, and you continue to
Mhm.
turn a blind eye,
Yeah.
and yet you're still there.
I said, what do you mean nothing?
Right.
And she said, what is the word? This place, immune. There's an immunity
Oh, sure.
that they have to this
Yeah.
type of stuff.
Well, it's just like him being in the military. There's an immunity.
Yeah.
You know, and just like with your
Yeah.
case, you know, it's men protecting men
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in position of power.
Yeah.
And the higher ranking they are, the more difficult it is.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Vanessa Guillen,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
that's a prime example of the military
Talk about a triggering.
train wreck, you
Ugh.
know?
God, that was so triggering watching that.
It was absolutely awful, but you know, her family knew from the jump that something wasn't right
Mhm.
and would not leave it alone.
Yeah.
And it was their persistence and their just continuous being a voice
Mm-hmm.
and saying no, standing outside the gates and saying, where's my sister? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Find her.
Well, same thing, I mean, and this is related to education in the same way that you have to have that stance with your child
Yeah,
advocating as well.
right.
Because they do try to out-money families. They try to drag it out as long as possible to where it just becomes
Sure.
the parents quit.
Give up, yeah.
It's just too exhausting. And lots of times parents have more than one child
Sure.
that have, and things are always going on, you know, life.
Right.
And nothing's being done to try to help them get just a little bit of relief. Just a little bit of relief that at least
Right.
when your kid goes to school,
Right.
you know, that
Right.
they're trying to take care of that. I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And that's why I believe, because it was like, this is sad. Yeah, I couldn't sleep at night. You know, already as a teacher, you can't sleep at night worrying about other people's kids in the first place.
Sure, I bet.
But then knowing I'm being prevented from doing what I know these children need
Right.
and what they're entitled to by law,
Right.
I couldn't do it. And I hated leaving them. I still feel terrible, you know. Every once in a while, a mom will text me about the kids, or and what I was saying earlier about the kid I had in class, his mom was worried about him in high school. She emailed me a couple of weeks ago now, and he's going to be a forensic detective. He's doing fantastic in college. He met his tribe.
Yeah.
You know, all of those things. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, you know, and I've had a few of those experiences, you know, and
But what a pillar of light. I really want to applaud you, because you, I don't think, will ever know the impact that you have had on the kids in your life, because, and I'm sure you do, like you said, to an extent, but on the other end of the spectrum, you were that light in the dark for them, you know, and you are going to be what is they're going to be talking about for 30 years later. You're going to be that one teacher that they talk about.
I mean,
You
that
know?
was my hope, that I could
Yeah.
just give them. I don't care what else is happening. I cannot control
Right.
anything outside of my classroom.
Right.
But here, they're going to be safe,
Right.
happy,
Right.
healthy,
Right.
you know, food.
Right.
Teenage boys. Oh, number one pet peeve as a teenager is making them wait till 1 o'clock in the afternoon to eat.
And then giving them 15 minutes.
And teachers don't allow snacks in the classroom because
Right.
the trash might get on the floor.
Sure.
Eat.
Yes.
Eat.
Well,
What
I
else
hate-
do you need?
And I hate
You
that
know?
it's rushed too. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why are we giving? I mean, and my kids have complained about this many times. Why did? I mean, they're starving by the time they get home.
Mhm.
I didn't get to finish my food.
Mhm.
I didn't get to finish my
It's
food.
particularly hard for neurodivergent people to sit down,
Yes.
prepare, eat.
Yes,
I mean, there's a lot that goes into eating.
there is.
And when you're a
It takes
time
me like an
constraint,
hour to eat.
yes, when you're on a time constraint,
Yes.
that makes it even harder to get started.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like,
I mean, when we're at home, it'll literally probably take her close to an hour sometimes just to finish one thing, because she's up moving all
Yes.
the time, back and
Yes.
forth, back and forth, back and forth. So
Yeah.
it's hard for her to have to just sit still
yes,
and do that,
Mhm.
you know. And I'm the same way. You know,
Yeah.
I'm up and down, and I'm working on jewelry. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
And so I totally get it, and I think it's just really frustrating because they should have an hour, especially like in elementary too, just to
Mhm.
sit down, be able to socialize,
Yeah.
take your time eating, let your food digest.
not
you know?
socialize if you don't want to.
Sure,
A
yes.
safe space, safe,
Yes,
quiet,
correct.
non-stimulating space.
Yes.
That's like blows up admin's mind when you want that for a kid,
Right,
and you have to write it in your IEP because they're not
Yeah.
going to willingly give it to them.
right.
And you know, did I give up my lunch every day so these kids could come sit in here and eat? Yes, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You know, talking to they're funny, you know, they
Sure.
listen and play games, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But one thing about my room, I never had the lights on. It just presented a calmer atmosphere. You couldn't hear the zzz.
Yes.
You
Oh,
know,
I hate that.
and admin would come in and flip the lights on, and we're all like, "Ugh,"
Yes.
you know, like,
Yeah. Light sensitivity
Yeah.
is real.
And they tell them, turn the lights lights off, you know, or
Yeah.
I remember there were a couple days it was real stormy outside, so it was dark, and I had to turn on one set of lights, and they'd come in and be like, "What? No, turn the
Yes.
lights off," you know.
Yeah.
And that was one thing I trained my kids to do in the classroom was when somebody shoots up, we all come down. You know, we stop talking, we be still, we just stop for that kid, you know, and they would do that for each other. They were able to empathize. They'd walk out of my classrooms and be the biggest enemies, but walk in, they could give each other that empathy, that respect. They could understand that we're in here because we deal with our emotions different ways, but we are safe to show them in here, and we're not going to be, because that, and it wasn't something that I had to like threaten the kids about. It was just like, this is what we're going to do. You know, and sometimes I'd have to remind them, especially in the beginning, oh, this is one of those times where we're all, and they would. Some of them would lay their heads down, fall asleep. You know,
Teaching them healthy coping skills,
and,
you know?
Yeah, and it's in teachers, well, how come you don't have those? It's not because I'm doing magic.
Yeah.
I'm paying
You're
attention to
connecting.
what each kid needs in that moment, and it is exhausting.
It is.
It's difficult to
Yeah.
be tuned in with 7, 8 different personalities
It
at
is.
one time, you
It
know?
is.
Um,
But the person, and that's what I just made a post about gentle parenting. So like people, you know, like chastise gentle parenting, conscious parenting,
Yeah.
but not understanding that, you know, even applying that as a teacher, you could say being a gentle teacher
Yeah.
is one of the hardest jobs ever, ever.
Yes.
Because that requires you to be so emotionally tuned to your child.
Yes.
You are having to redirect, develop a coping skill because a child is not going to learn how to develop healthy self-soothing skills or anything, or manage their emotions by being forced to sit in a corner alone in isolation.
Right.
What is that teaching a child?
Right.
That my feelings don't matter and that I have to go deal with my emotions by myself. You know, and instead of creating a community like you did in your classrooms of saying, hey, this is a safe space. When one person is struggling, we're here to listen and validate those struggles and give them. So now, like, as those kids that you've teached go into adulthood, which I feel like you've also is parenting. You have really parented many children other than your own and given them tools of emotional awareness and stability. And to me, that's, how are they going to like compare that? You know what I mean?
And it's amazing how some things don't even occur to them until they hear it.
Sure.
You know, I had many, when I taught in Del Cine, many times that I've said, you know, lots of them are from gay families and stuff, and parents who are incarcerated, either their whole life or parts of their lives, and in and out, all that type of stuff. But I remember saying one time, you know, you can go your whole life without going to jail. Your whole life. I said, people do it all the time. Never, ever. And they would really be shocked by that. Like, really? Like,
But yeah,
I mean, it was really rewarding. I really enjoyed working with kids whose minds work differently. It was a challenge to me to almost learn how to unlock that brain, you know, and you know, I hope that I was able to give kids some relief, even if it was an hour a day that they were with me, you know, or whatever. My autistic students from Norman High, you know, what services are there for profoundly autistic people after they leave school? Nothing.
yeah.
And
that's the thing too, like, you know, which is beneficial if, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like, you know, the IEPs are very beneficial, like while the child is in school, but they don't carry after that, which psychological reports do, which is why those are also very helpful and important, because even if your child has not had a psychological evaluation, the school cannot legally diagnose your child with anything, but they can say, hey, this child meets all of the requirements for autism or whatever, dyslexia, it could be anything, but they're not legally allowed to say, hey, he has autism.
Right.
And so that's very important to understand, because if you're looking for the school to test your child and diagnose your child, they can't do that.
That's right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, we are going to wrap things up, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoyed
you
talking to
for your vulnerability, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you, and just your strength, your bravery, your courage, your willingness to never allow what you've been through to close your heart.
Right.
You have remained to keep your heart open and to continue loving despite how mistreated you've been, and you've continued to transform your pain into purpose and really utilize your trauma for the good of the collective as a whole. And you have poured into so many people that will have a lasting impact that you may never even see in this lifetime. But it's so beautiful to know you and to fully hear your story, and just thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being safe, feeling safe with me to share that. And I hope that anyone that is watching and hears her story resonates, and you feel heard and seen and validated in your truth. You know, I'll say it at every podcast we do, you know, if you are someone that has thoughts of suicide or experiencing domestic violence, we will always link the numbers. And resources are also available in my link tree. We are in the state of Oklahoma, so those are the resources that I have linked. And we just hope that by continuously sharing stories like this, that we will spread awareness, knowledge, education, and women together are stronger. And when we unite together, when we love each other and hold space for each other, this is what creates change.
Yeah.
This is what really just invites others to want to do the same and want to speak their truth. And so that's my hope in continuously providing these spaces for other women to speak outwardly.
Yes.
And no longer be silenced by the system, by their exes or anything like that, because we have to talk about these things. We have to talk about uncomfortable truths. We have to speak outwardly, because when we don't, nothing will ever change. And I feel so grateful to have this experience with you.
Thank you.
So thank you. So thank you for watching, listening. You can stream any of our episodes on all platforms, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We release new episodes every single Monday. And thank